you beautiful bastards? Hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome back to the DeFranco Show, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is one of the most requested entertainment/social stories. And that's a story around Star Wars actress Kelly Marie Tran. You most likely remember her as Rose Tico from The Last Jedi. And there were stories coming out this week that she completely wiped her Instagram because she had just been receiving so much abuse online. After the movie came out, along with people that were kind of critiquing her acting or the character in general, there were also just people throwing hate her way. You had people hitting her with slurs, trashing her appearance, many taking aim at her weight. But also an important thing to note is even though this was trending, people were writing stories about it, there was never really a confirmation from Kelly Marie Tran herself. Granted, it wouldn't be surprising, and she also wouldn't be the first female in Star Wars to just leave Instagram because of the abuse. Of course, Daisy Ridley did that back in 2016 temporarily. And actually, thanks to Last Jedi director Rian Johnson going on a small Twitter spree, we did see some sort of confirmation. Johnson tweeting, "What we talk about when we talk about man babies. On social media, a few unhealthy people can cast a big shadow on the wall. But over the past 4 years, I've met lots of real fellow Star Wars fans. We like and dislike stuff, but we do it with humor, love, and respect. We're the vast majority. We're having fun and doing just fine." Then, in response to one of several people who tried to say that he was taking criticisms and calling it hate, he responded, "Done with this disingenuous bullshit. You know the difference between not liking a movie and hatefully harassing a woman so bad she has to get off social media. And you know which of those two we're talking about here." And personally, I think that note of separation is incredibly important. I'm a big believer in all criticism isn't hate, right? If people are sounding off and they're like, "I didn't like the character, I don't go why this character did this, the character was unnecessary for insert blank reason." Those are critiques. When people are personally attacking her, they are harassing her, they're throwing slurs at her, that is not the same thing. And I think many communities in general can get very, very defensive when they feel like, even though you're just talking about a small segment, that everyone that is a part of that group may be painted by a very broad brush. Now, of course, the other part of the debate that always pops up with stories like this is, hey, you're a famous person now, you are in a massive movie, this comes with the territory. Yes, it does, but that shouldn't make us less sympathetic to the people that have to go through it. I've essentially been doing varying versions of this online for the past 10 years, and I've had the worst of the worst constantly thrown at me. This also including death threats, and if you ask many YouTubers, they have similar experiences. And the only reason I'm okay with it is a very long time ago, I made peace with the fact that there is always going to be a great number of people that fucking hate me. And keep in mind, kind of like Johnson tries to point out, that I'm not talking about criticisms. These are two separate things and should be treated as such. And with the genuine harassment and hate, it should never be so normalized that we put kind of the shame and the weight of it on the person being harassed. And on the other end, it's also important we don't take the actions of a minority in a much larger group, whether it be the Star Wars fandom, my audience, any audience, and then say, oh, well, that's the example of all of them. And one of the best ways to fight against that broad brush is if you are part of those communities calling that shit out. But that's my personal takeaway from it, and actually I'd love to know yours in the comments down below. Then on Tuesday, we saw David Hogg's family home swatted. David Hogg, of course, a Parkland survivor and activist. Reportedly, someone called the sheriff's office and said that there was a hostage situation at the house. According to the Broward County Sheriff's Office, a SWAT team then responded to the call. They cleared the home. Luckily, at that time, neither David nor his mother were home. Reportedly, at that time, they were in Washington, D.C. to accept the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award. And just a quick thing that I want to sound off with this story, there were so many places that covered this and called this a prank. Some places like Mashable went a little bit further, called it a dangerous prank. But let's get something straight. This is not a prank. This is a crime. Swatting is a crime. A crime that we've seen in the past year has resulted in a death. I don't care if you hate someone on the left, I don't care if you hate someone on the right, but to swat someone, you are a disgusting fucking individual. Not only are you doing something that could result in the death of the individual you're trying to prank, it's not a prank once again. You're putting law enforcement in a horrible situation where they may make a mistake and do something horrible. And that's just in addition to wasting law enforcement's time where they could actually be helping other people that do need help. And here's the thing, someone may have done this to David Hogg because they hate him. They want to teach him a lesson, but all you really accomplished was to make him a more sympathetic figure. So congratulations. But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and today in Awesome brought to you by BetterHelp.com/DeFranco. BetterHelp, if you do not know, is the fantastic place where you can get affordable private online counseling. You get access to licensed, trained, experienced, accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board licensed professional counselors. All you've got to do is go to BetterHelp.com/DeFranco. You fill out the questionnaire, they match you with a counselor, and you can start counseling today. And so if you want to make the smart move like many from the nation already have, you want to try it out, go to BetterHelp.com/DeFranco and get started. And the first bit of awesome, holy hell, I did not realize how much I wanted this movie in my my life. We had a full trailer for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and one, the story looks really, really interesting, and two, the animation style is fucking amazing. That said, I will say Jake Johnson has such a distinct voice that I can't help but think of Nick from New Girl when I hear it. But that said, I'm sure I'll get past that in the first minute, and I'm just so excited. Then for those who have been asking to see more of the new studio, today we uploaded a brand new vlog where we kind of did a walkthrough for the team who had not been here yet, as well as for you. So if you're interested, be sure to check that out and maybe even subscribe to that channel. Then we got the Honest Game trailer for Shaq Fu. Then we had Johnny Knoxville recounting some of his most painful injuries. Then we had Seeker giving us an extended trailer for the science behind The Swim. Then we got the trailer for A Star Is Born starring Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. And in addition to starring in this film, this is also Cooper's first time directing. And if you want to see the full versions of everything, I just shared the secret link of the day, anything at all. Links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about Santa Clara County Superior Court Judge Aaron Persky. And for those that don't remember Persky, he was the California judge who ruled on the Brock Turner sexual assault case. There, the jury found Brock Turner guilty of assaulting an unconscious woman behind a dumpster after a fraternity party. And in total, he was actually found guilty of 3 felony charges. And while Brock Turner faced a maximum of 14 years in prison for this, the prosecutors ended up only recommending 6 years, but Persky, of course, famously only gave him a 6-month jail sentence, of which Brock Turner only actually served 3 months. And as far as why the sentence was so small, he said Turner had no previous criminal record. He believed Turner would not be a danger to others, also saying he had a concern that a prison sentence would have a severe impact on him. And immediately after he handed down this sentence, in addition to the just general backlash and outrage, something else happened. A law professor at Stanford by the name of Michelle Dauber, whose daughter is friends with the victim, launched a recall campaign against Persky. And that campaign argued that Judge Persky had shown a pattern of leniency towards athletes and in cases involving sexual assault or other sex crimes or domestic violence. And as far as why Dauber argued that this recall was so incredibly important, she pointed out that Judge Persky is a criminal judge, one of the very few criminal judges who has a jurisdiction over Stanford. So that means that we would be waiting 6 more years in order to remove him according to the regular election process, and any sexual assaults that happen on the Stanford campus during that time would be highly unlikely to receive a prison sentence based on this precedent. And the campaign gained a lot of steam. You had some prominent figures like attorney and law professor Anita Hill, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and ultimately the campaign collected nearly 100,000 signatures, which was far more than they needed to get the question put on the ballot. But on the other end, there was also a lot of support for Persky. Persky arguing that a recall would threaten the rule of law and judicial independence, making judges fearful of public backlash when handing down rulings.
When public opinion influences a juror's decision or a judge's decision, it corrupts the rule of law. The judicial recall, if successful, will be a silent force, a silent corrupting force, a force that will enter the minds of judges as they contemplate difficult decisions. I think judicial recalls should be reserved for misconduct by a judge or incompetence.
And Persky had support from dozens of law school professors, retired judges, and the Santa Clara Bar Association. And additionally, Persky stands by his ruling with Brock Turner, calling it a lawful sentence. Also noting that the County Bar Association found no pattern of bias or undue leniency in his record. Also adding that the State Commission on Judicial Performance found no ethical violations with the Turner case. But on the other end of that, you had the recall campaign saying the Commission's report was error-ridden, calling out the lack of transparency and oversight. Also pointing out that the Center for Public Integrity recently gave California an F for judicial accountability in a detailed state study. The main point, both sides raise money, they campaign, it ultimately comes down to yesterday. And with 97% of precincts reporting, 59.8% of voters supported recalling Persky. And this makes him the first California judge to be recalled from office in 86 years. And as far as what the extended fallout of this is, outside of just Persky himself, will this affect other judges? What else will this do with the legal process? We're gonna have to kind of just wait and see. Because the Brock Turner case, and specifically Persky's sentencing, did have a bigger change. California lawmakers have enacted mandatory minimums for sexual assault cases. They also ended up closing a sexual assault loophole and expanded the legal definition of rape to include all forms of non-consensual sexual assault. Rape had been previously defined as an act of sexual intercourse under certain conditions of force, duress, or lack of consent. And so other types of sexual assault, such as penetration by a foreign object, were categorized as separate offenses. And essentially, to oversimplify it, because of California law at that time, Turner's crimes at the time were considered non-violent. Because he assaulted an intoxicated/unconscious person, they could not resist. So he didn't have to use force, and thus it was not violent. And then, of course, now today we have the Persky recall. And so with all of that said, I want to pass the questions off to you. What do you think about Persky being recalled? Is it a good thing, or no, this is a slippery slope, there's going to be negative effects? Any thoughts, all your opinions, let me know in those comments down below. Then you may remember this picture of Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian in the Oval Office. A lot of people kind of made fun of it, many questioning why is this happening? And on this show we only talked about it very briefly, but did mention that she was speaking on behalf of Alice Marie Johnson and trying to get her a voluntary pardon. This is very much a conversation about prison reform and mandatory minimums for non-violent crimes. And it appears that Kim Kardashian, who championed Alice Marie Johnson's story, is now responsible for her being a soon-to-be free woman. This because today, President Trump commuted Alice Johnson's life sentence. Now, many people were surprised by this move from Donald Trump, and not just because it was Kim Kardashian that brought it to his attention, because among other things, this is the same president that said he wanted to seek the death penalty when it came to drug dealers.
But if we don't get tough on the drug dealers, we're wasting our time. Just remember that. We're wasting our time. And that toughness includes the death penalty.
And obviously, while all nonviolent drug offenders have their own different stories, their own different situations, when you look at Alice Johnson's story, you kind of see why people think that it's too much to give these people life with no parole. With Johnson, she just reportedly had a role facilitating communications in a cocaine trafficking operation. And she said she initially became involved in the drug trafficking in the first place due to significant financial hardship after a string of unfortunate events in her life. She had lost her job at FedEx due to a gambling addiction. Her son was killed in a motorcycle accident, and her marriage ended in divorce. This desperate person in a horrible place that, yes, did do something illegal. But one of the big questions to pop up is, because it was a non-violent offense, should that person get life with no parole? But on that note, the reason she got life without parole at that time is due to the amount of drugs involved in her case. But it still begs the question, is it the right thing to do for that person and also for the country and government? Right? Not only is that person locked away for life, but if you're thinking of it from just a business standpoint, that person becomes a constant net negative for our government and for every taxpayer. And actually, with this story, that's the question I want to pass off to you. What are your thoughts around mandatory minimum sentences for non-violent drug crimes? And also, because there is this argument, do you see drug crimes as potential violent crimes depending on the drug, because it is going to ruin other lives? And that's where we're going to end today's show. And of course, remember, if you like this video, like the way I try and cover news, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you missed yesterday's Philip DeFranco show, you want to catch up, click or tap right there. Or if you want to see kind of the new tour around the new facility as it gets set up, click or tap right there. But that said, of course, as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.